When I taught at Penn State, I had the privilege of teaching a class called Student Sitcom. And it was exactly what it sounds like. The students would write a sitcom, and then that was in the writing portion of the class. And then they would come to me, and we would produce the sitcom, and we would film it, and we'd put it online. And it was just to give them that experience of doing it. And it was a very sort of coveted class. In order to become a part of the cast, you had to audition. And in order to become a part of the crew, you had to interview with me. And I only had so many slots in the class that I was, that I could invite people into the class. So there was some competition for it. And so I would interview all the students that were interested, and then I would sort of make my selections based on, my best assessment, or, did they have the experience or the drive or the know-how or whatever. And I had a student, let's call him Jay. Jay wanted to be a part of the student sitcom. So he came in, and I interviewed him, asked him about himself, blah, 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 blah. And I said this question, I asked him this question: what do you want to do on the sitcom? Like, what do you want to do? Like, what role would you like? Would you like to be a part of the camera department, part of the sound department, editing? I was just asking, what did you want to do? And his answer perplexed me. He said, I'll do anything. It doesn't matter. I'll do anything. And that's great. It sounds really enthusiastic, but I had a problem with Jay. I didn't know what to do with it. Because I had all of these students, they're like, I want to work on sound. I want to do this. I want to do that. And they had this drive to do something, become a part of the project. They had dreams. Even if I'd known, Jay, what do you ultimately want to do? Do you want to write? Do you want to direct? Do you want to do camera? Do you want to, be in the technical side, in the design side? What do you want to be? What do you want to do? And he was like, anything. I will do anything. And he meant it as this sort of like willingness that he would go wherever I sent him. But I couldn't use him. I couldn't use him, and I didn't give him a position in the class because I had other students that knew what they wanted. And I knew that when I asked them to do something, I was asking them to do something they wanted. I was harnessing a desire that was already a part of who they were, already a part of what they wanted. And that was something that me, as a leader of this little ragtag team that we were putting together, but there was power there. And I could say, okay, if I ask so-and-so, to do something with the camera because they love camera work, they're going to be motivated to do it as well as they can. But with Jay, I had this sort of open book, which seems great, but it became impossible for me to know how to use him or how best to use him. So I left him out of the class. There were a few other students that were, it was a meritocracy, and I was trying to choose who would be my best team. Now, don't worry, Jay figured things out and became a part of the class the next year, and had a very successful time at Penn State. I don't know what he's up to now, but I'm sure he's doing great things. Jay figured it all out. But this, as I was thinking about the theme for guidance this week, the idea of guidance, that became very important to me. This idea just kept coming over, like this experience I had with Jay. Jay wanted my guidance. I couldn't give it to him because I didn't know what he wanted. I thought that was interesting. I had another experience recently with my son. He's over at school in Boston, and he had a big decision to make at the beginning of the year, because at the beginning of the year, he's involved in all of sort of the theatrical productions over there, or many of them. And last year he was in a theater company called the Hasty Puddings, and they produce an original musical, and he had a marvelous time, just great time doing this musical, and just played this like sort of pop star who ended up being, I'm going to give away the ending, but he ended up being the murderer. And it was just this wonderful, and he had this big pop song called Holding Out for... Holden. His character's name was Holden, Out Hope for You, Girl. Anyways, he played Holden, and sang this amazing pop song and danced his little tail off, and it was great. And he had this big decision to make. Do I want to audition for the Hasty Puddings again? Do I want to do it again? And he was sort of tortured by this decision because he loved doing it so much, but he had all of these others. He's writing a musical. He's doing all of these other things that he wants to give time to. And this was a very time-intensive commitment that he was deciding on whether to make or not. Lovely, but do I want to do it based on all these other things I want to do? So he was sort of tortured by this decision. And he kept coming to my wife and me and asking, what do I do? What do I do? Mom, Dad, what should I do? Should I do the hasty puddings, or should I keep that time open to do some of my other projects that I want to do? And we couldn't advise him other than to say, what do you want? Do what you want to do. That's the right answer. Because we could say, oh, you should do this, or you should do that. But no matter what it was, if Jordan and I, or I said it, my wife or I said it, we were going to be wrong. Because what he should do is what he wanted, what he felt the drive to do. And I found myself giving him the advice that my father gave me when I was young and still gives me to this day. Make a choice and the Lord will bless you. Make a choice, God will bless you. God will bless that choice, right? It's the choosing. That's how God knows how to guide any one of us. That's how the universe guides us, is by knowing what we want and then leading us there. And you look at any spiritual giant, any prophet of the Old or New Testament, any of them, and you think, well, God told them what to do. Sure. But I guarantee they wanted it. They wanted to be on the spiritual path that they were on. And I think that's a mistake that happens in religious life sometime. That we're saying, thy will be done. And that we think that God has plans for us that we probably don't like. And that is not true. It is not true. What you start to understand as you explore your relationship with the universe, with God, with Spirit, with all that is, that your will, your true will, the things that you really desire, love, care about, they are also God's will for you. And that guidance requires wanting. Just like Jay, just like my son Kaylor, we needed to know, in order to guide Kaylor or Jay, I needed to know what they wanted. And that's a key piece of this puzzle, because the guidance that we're seeking from God, from the universe, from Spirit, the guidance that we're seeking is a collaborative effort. It is not something that comes down from on high. I have chosen you to do this because I want you to do it. No, I have chosen you to do this because I can see you want to. That's how I felt about Jay. When Jay finally told me what he wanted, I was like, okay, you have chosen, and now I know. Because the other thing that I think sometimes gets misinterpreted in this, in the sort of hubbub of spiritual ideology, is this idea that life is school, that we are meant to learn. Okay? That's what we're here to do, is to learn things and grow and do important things that we learn and grow. And we go to school and we do tests and we do hard things. And it's not true. It's one of the biggest lies that any religion might tell you, is that your job is to be here to learn something specific. What am I supposed to learn? The answer is nothing. Learn nothing. God has no expectation for you to learn anything. You have no obligation to learn anything. You have no destination. Nothing is required of you other than the joy and pleasure of being. There is no destination that you must attain, that you are supposed to be chasing. It doesn't exist. You are here simply for the joy and pleasure of being. And yes, you might find there's a destination you want. And in that case, that is your calling. Go. But there's no obligation, no requirement to learn, no requirement to suffer in school the things that you're supposed to learn. Your will is one with God's. What you want, God wants. Just like what my son Kaler wanted, I wanted. If he wanted to do hasty puddings, I wanted him to do hasty puddings. If he didn't want to do hasty puddings and do something else, I wanted him to not do hasty puddings and do something else. That's what I wanted. His will was my will. I'm not saying I'm God. I'm just saying we were in that relationship where he was looking for guidance. And my guidance was, what do you want? And once you tell me what you want, I will help you get it as much as I can. Do you see how that works? I think it's a beautiful, beautiful idea. It's a collaborative effort. I love this book, Conversations with God by Neale Donald Walsch, in which Neale Donald Walsch simply has a conversation with God. He asks God questions and writes down the answers. It's a lovely, lovely journey. And he asked, well, a myriad of questions, but one of the answers God gives is sort of how existence came into being. Why is there something and not nothing, right? And he says it this way, and I find this as good as any explanation of creation I've ever heard. In the beginning, that which is all there was, and there was nothing else. And yet, all that is could not know itself, because all that is all there was, and there was nothing else. Still, all that is chose to know itself experientially. And so all that is divided itself, becoming in one glorious moment that which is this and that which is that. I think that's lovely. God, this description of God coming into being, there was oneness, there was one, there was a singularity, nothing else. And that essence of existence decided, I want to know myself experientially. And to do that, I require opposition. There needs to be a this for you to understand a that. There needs to be up to understand down. There needs to be death to understand life. There needs to be pain to understand pleasure. And that's how that simple desire to experience selfness is what gave rise to all that is. I love that story. I think it's as good as any. So we are here. Oh, and one more quote from God in Conversations with God. My purpose is for you to know yourself as me. That's simple. The joy of being God, which is what each one of you are. I am. We are God divided to experience all that is, to know things experientially. So we're here to experience whatever we want. All that is. God, the multiverse, had knowledge of everything and yet wanted to know it experientially. I think that's interesting. I think that's very, very compelling. But it also tells us there's nothing we need to learn because we already know everything. If we truly are expressions of God, if we truly are one, which I believe, for a number of reasons, most of which is because I feel the truth of it. But I believe we are all part of God. We are all part of one singular experience. And you can call it anything you want, God, the universe. I want to keep it as open as possible to this idea. But we are one with all that is. And if that's true, then we already know everything we need to know. And so all we're doing as we go through this life is experiencing it. Is finally experiencing and learning something that we already knew, but we get to experience it in real life. We know the difference between this. When you say, okay, I know of a person, I know about Julia Roberts, but I don't know her, not experientially. Do you see the difference? And that's what God wants for us, is experience. And that's why sometimes when you receive a new piece of knowledge, it feels familiar. It feels like coming home. I don't know if that happens to you, but to me it does. Sometimes I learn something new, an insight comes to me, and it feels like coming home. It feels like I've known it all my life. Because you see, I have. And I'm simply just experiencing it. And this is spoken of, sung of by Gonzo. We know Gonzo. My daughter just went, huh? Gonzo? Gonzo in the Muppet movie sings a beautiful, beautiful song. And in it, Gonzo sings, "There's not a word yet for old friends who just met." And I'm telling you, when you receive that new piece of knowledge, but it feels like you've known it all your life, it's because it's an old friend you just met. And that's what experiential knowledge does for us. That's why in German, there are two different words for knowledge. Wissen means intellectual knowledge, and kennen, which means to know someone, something personally, intimately, through experience. And we're here to get that kennenlernen. That's what they call it, kennenlernen, to learn to know something. There's another song I want to quote by David Pomerantz, also a Muppet, a masterful Muppet moment with John Denver, the Christmas album with John Denver, and he sings, "It's in every one of us to be wise. Find your heart, open up both your eyes. We can all know everything without ever knowing why. It's in every one of us, by and by." Do you feel the power of that? I'll tell you why you do. Because you already knew it. You already know that you know everything. And you just get the privilege of meeting it, of meeting that old friend. And feeling like you just met, but you've known each other forever. So no knowledge is new. And no knowledge is required. There's nothing we need to learn, but we can still know everything. I find that beautiful. I find it inspiring. So you say, okay, Matt, that's all great. Still, how do I know what I want? If you say, God wants to give me what I want, God wants to guide me, the universe wants to guide me to what I want, how do I know what I want? It's tough sometimes. Like, I don't know. Because sometimes you're in the position that Jay was in. I'll do anything. Just tell me what. Right? But it's hard to know. There are a couple of ways. I'm going to give you a couple of ideas. Hopefully they'll help. Stories. Stories are a great way to learn what you want. Movies, books, stories. Stories you hear told to you from your parents, your friends. These stories can teach us what we want. How do I know this? We went to a parent gathering of all my son's at Harvard. Brag. My son's at Harvard, and they had like a little gathering for Harvard parents. And we went to meet some of the parents, and one of the parents told us that the reason their daughter was in medical school is because of Doc McStuffins, the cartoon Doc McStuffins, right? Sometimes you see a story and you're like, I want that. That's what I want. Sometimes that's the way you know, is by hearing that other people have tried it or done it, right? I wanted to be Luke Skywalker. That's why I'm on the spiritual journey I'm on. And in fact, for me, every story I ever saw, I wanted to be a part of. That's why I'm a filmmaker. So I get to do lots of stories. I don't have to stick to one, right? But somebody felt Doc McStuffins, that's my path, and they went on that path. And so these stories have the power to teach us what we want. And that's why all religions are story-based, every single one. Think of a religion that doesn't have a story associated with it. They all do. They have mythologies that they use as guides for life. And it doesn't have to be, oh, I'm going to live my life exactly the way Jesus did, or you know, Buddha or Zeus. I'm not living my life that way, but it gives me a map. They are maps to our humanity. And sometimes we lose that sense of mythology in our lives and we don't know where to go. That's when we turn to stories. So, I want to be Barbie. I mean, that story is about a beautiful journey towards experiential knowledge, I think. I want to be Luke Skywalker. I want to be Wonder Woman. I want to be Jesus. I want to feel that path, and that could be a guide for you. There's a great movie, The Never-Ending Story, based on a book, also a gorgeous book, but this movie had a great impact on me. And I'm going to tell you about a moment from that story, and I hope it will illustrate how story has the power to give us guidance. Atreyu, the hero of our story. So just to give you a little background, Bastian is a little boy who finds this book, The Never-Ending Story, and is reading this book about this hero boy, Atreyu, who's trying to save Fantasia from the nothing. And so he has to go on this journey, this adventure, and it's very tough. There's some sad moments. I won't tell you about them. They're rough. But he comes to these gates. He's trying to get to the Southern Oracle so he can find out how to save Fantasia from the nothing. And one of the gates he goes to, it's a mirror. And he goes to the mirror and sees himself there. But as he looks deeper, he sees Bastian, the boy reading the book in the attic of his school. He sees Bastian, and Bastian sees him. And they see each other, and we realize that this story is connected deeply to Bastian's life. The one reading the story finds himself in the story. And I feel like that is a really powerful expression of how story can become interwoven into who we are. They become a part of our beliefs, because beliefs are simply stories that we practice. Beliefs are stories that we practice, and we practice them over and over again. However, stories can be a double-edged sword, because just like a story can free you to find who you are and who you want to be, stories can also enslave you. When you hear those stories that say, you can't have this, you can't be this, the stories that make you afraid, the stories that engender hatred, fear, division, those are the stories that enslave, and they are used to control. And sometimes we have those stories in our heads, even if it's just from our parents. Oh yeah, we don't do that. That's not a part of who we are. And yet you're like, but I feel it inside me. But if that story gets practiced enough, you stop believing in who you want to be. And who you want becomes overtaken by someone else's decision for what is good for you, for what you should be. And they start telling you who to be, how to be, what to be. And that's no fair. And it's no fun. So you're like, okay, Matt, sometimes these stories, they're almost unconscious. They're in our subconscious. How do we rid ourselves of them? And that's when I'm going to ask you to harness the power of nothing. So we have nothing that we're required to learn. But if you learn about the power of nothing, you'll see where you can get. I told you the story, the creation story, based on how Conversations with God explains it. There's another creation myth. And I say myth, I don't mean something that's not true. Myth is more than true. It's uber truth. It doesn't have to actually be something that occurred to be true, to be experientially true. Well, science says, okay, it began with the Big Bang. This is still a story. But there was a singularity. Sound familiar? There was one tiny little point in space that contained all that is. And it exploded into all that is. And it divided. And the forces of nature divided. And particles and energy divided. And became the variety of everything we see in this universe. Doesn't that sound like God dividing themselves to experience themselves? I find that interesting. But what's really interesting about this theory of the Big Bang, there's a new theory that there was a Big Bang. They sort of don't know exactly what happened before that. That's fine. I'm not going to try to explain it. But there was this period of inflation in the universe where everything expanded farther than you could possibly comprehend, or me, um, in the blink of an eye, less than a blink of an eye, 10 to the negative 36 of a second. So fast, you can't even comprehend how fast that is, and expanded. And it wasn't that just matter and energy were being thrown out like an explosion. Literally, the space between particles expanded. Like a balloon. If you put dots on a balloon and you blow it up, the dots will get farther apart. And this happened so fast. And they think it was because of this, they call it an inflaton field. I'm pretending like I know what this is. I don't. All I know is it's a field in space, in nothingness. And there's immense energy in nothingness. And this energy has the capacity to create universes. And so this is the power of nothing. And I'm like, okay, you're like, Matt, it's not really nothing because there's still energy there. We can quibble over semantics, but the nothingness in space-time has the power to create universes. And it's something that you already know. You're like, wait, how do I know this, Matt? How do I know this? Have you ever stepped into an empty theater and felt the power of the potentiality? Or looked at an empty plate and saw the potentiality of filling it with food? Or an empty canvas? Do you feel, has it ever inspired you? Are there any spaces in your life that are empty but inspire you? Just a room. I want to decorate this room, right? But as Lao Tzu tells us, here we go, cut doors and windows to make a room. Emptiness makes the room useful, right? This is a room. The thing that makes this room useful is the space within it, the emptiness, the nothingness that we fill with creation. And that is a powerful, powerful idea. And so you recognize that nothing contains the potentiality for everything. I like the idea of an empty theater space because I'm a theater guy and it always inspires me to be in a theater. And there's a great book called The Empty Space by Peter Brooks. And he says something I find magical. A stage space has two rules. One, anything can happen. And two, something must happen. That's your life. The space created by your existence has the potential for everything. Anything can happen, and something must. And something will. Why not let it be the thing that you want it to be? So find those empty spaces and fill them with what you want. So I want to do a quick little practical sort of meditation to help us harness the power of nothing. So I want you to close your eyes. And I want you to envision pure space, whatever that looks like. Pure space where there is nothing. No earth, no stars, just pure space. And while you're in that pure space, let go of your body. Let go of your mind. Be nobody, in no place, at no time. No pain, no disease, no job, no desires, simply nothing. Be there for a few moments. Now open your eyes and just ask yourself this simple question: what do I want? From that space of nothing where there are no obligations, no expectations from anybody else, what do I want? And if the answer comes, feel the power of it. What would it feel like to have that? And let that feeling be your guide. But it must come from nothing, because if it doesn't, it might come from stories that someone else told that they think you should be living. But I want you to let yourself free of those stories and create in the void. And in that void, you're working with energy, not with crude matter, but energy that you can create with. And then, as you let that feeling be your guide, reach out to God, to the universe, to spirit, to whatever you believe in, and watch the synchronicities happen in your life that will lead you to the thing that you want. Watch the opportunities appear. Watch the ideas appear that say, I should try this. I should talk to this person. These are the things that God, the universe, can guide you with once you know what you want, free of the stories that enslave, inspired by the stories that empower. If I can quote Gonzo again, he says, I've never been there, but I know the way. Learn nothing. Know everything. And experience the joy and pleasure of being.